Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Oliver Tyson. We're going to be discussing his amazing book, I Dream. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. All of the regular online book resellers. Head on over there today, pick up copies, and get lost in it. And I'm going to tell you why you need to do that in just a few moments. But before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Oliver was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And people, if you follow us, well, you already know I'm talking about CITI of Books. For my writers out there who are going through that process, I mean, you are going through your gauntlet of getting your book created. Although now you need help moving the book you just finished creating. Well, if that's you, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give and contact CITI of Books. I'm telling you, they're one of the best in the business to do it, and people, this is exactly what they specialize in. So head on over to cityofbooks.com today and gather all of the ways that their fantastic team is going to help maximize your creative endeavors. And listen, a moment ago I told you, you need to pick up this book, I Dream. Once you hear what we're going to be discussing today, once you start to do some research on his book, well, you're going to understand why you need to do just that. Oliver is the expert. I mean, it's his book. He's written it. He's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. But keep in mind, people, we're only going to scratch the surface here. By the time we've concluded, you are going to run to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and purchase your copies because you're going to understand how wonderful of a book this truly is. Without further ado, let's bring Oliver here on the line with us to discuss it. Oliver, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm doing very well indeed.
Fantastic. Well, Oliver, listen, it's a pleasure, man. I think what you're doing here is needed. We know that, listen, there's a lot happening in the world right now. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of chaos, and there's a lot of stress. A book of this magnitude that carries weight in terms of the message that it sends, but also balances it beautifully with the entertainment side of things to just allow people to get away, to allow people to escape to something that is fun, enjoyable. What you're doing here is special, man. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you again for being here with us to discuss it. Before we jump into the book, Oliver, tell us a little bit more about yourself, man.
All right. Well, there's not too much to tell about myself. I read. And I like reading. I'm American, originally from Virginia, and I traveled as much as my budget would allow, but most of my travel was to bookstores and increasing my collection of eclectic books and reading, and I am the coalescence of the books I've read.
I wasn't initially going to go into inspiration, but after that, I can't see myself going anywhere else. Clearly, you are an avid reader. You've mentioned that. This is something that is a part of you. Connect the dots for the transition from reading to becoming your own writer.
It's an odd path. Writing is always something I've loved to do. When I was younger, I didn't know what I wanted to write. Mm-hmm. But as I read, and I read a focused study on a very open-ended question. I like to read about more philosophy and religion and belief structures. And as I study how people feel, how people believe, I start to see an image of the connection between people. And so I want to write it. I wanted to write that down. I wanted to write, to the best of my ability, what we have in common.
Yeah.
And the subconscious beliefs. And that's what I read, and that's what I want to convey in my writing.
There you have it. And listen, sticking with inspiration, but building those blocks up towards I Dream, what inspired you to write this narrative?
So this is a complicated one. I Dream is based on a dream I had when I was much younger. It was a very weird dream, and I woke up, I tried to write it down, and I couldn't. I tried to write this story at least 100 times in 100 different ways. I tried to write it as a book, as a short story, as a screenplay, as a collection of designer plates. I could not get it down. Mm-hmm. And then during COVID, everything else shut down as it did for a lot of people. And I found myself going backwards in life instead of forwards. And I was in a very low place. I just sat down and started writing. And I didn't expect to write the book. I was just writing to get something out. And as I was writing, the story started coming together as I had wanted to write it all along. And it was amazing. And yeah, it was an amazing journey to write it.
Love that.
And it was good for myself too.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, Oliver, without further ado, man, let's jump right in. Let's not wait any longer. I Dream. Tell us a little bit more about the words on those pages.
So the book is about 3 stories, 3 very different stories over very different timelines. The first is about a prince, an old prince, a bastard. He was born of his mother, just not noble in any way. But his father is, he can't have children. So it's about a man who's gone his whole life destined for a throne until, by magic, a new heir is born. And suddenly his entire life plan is completely thrown asunder. And he has to take measures into his own hands to reclaim it. And that's about his story, what he does, and who he is. That's the first story. The second story is farther in the future, about a young girl who is in an education. She's in a prestigious school in a rather strict government. Think 1984 government.
Yeah. Where
the truth is heavily altered and controlled. And she's growing up in school, and her dream is to become part of this group that rewrites history. That's her focus. That's been her goal her whole life, until she comes across an illicit item, a book that in this world books are banned, writing is banned, and by coming across this, it introduces her into a whole new world, like an underground community, almost like his drugs, the way she sees it. It's this horrible thing that she's pulled into despite herself. And she says a whole new world opens to her. And that's the second story. It's about her on the path that she's known from childhood to a whole new world, and trying to figure out who she is in the world. A lot of self-discovery in that one. And the third story is about a young protagonist who finds, in a very weird way, an image of themselves from the ancient past. And they launch on this epic quest to find the truth about themselves, and it goes across the planet, throughout Africa. And it's a journey of self-discovery in a physical world that is both magical but also very realistic in a weird way. And these stories, where they seem completely far apart, they mix and they twist together in very original ways.
People, you know where you got to go. Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I said it already. Head on over there. Pick up your copies of I Dream by Oliver Tyson. You know, Oliver, follow-up question that I want to go into. And listen, my background is in filmmaking, okay? So I live in my imagination. And this is probably one of my favorite questions to ask. Oliver, if you could enter the world of your book and you could choose any page to land on, which page would you choose to, and why?
I don't actually know. Each one is kind of specific. The one in the ancient past, it's a very violent world. There's a war going on, so I don't know if I would want to go there. I'm not much of a fighter myself. I don't think I would last very long. The world in the future, it's on the brink of a needed revolution, and it's a scary time to live. It's a scary time to live vibrantly and to try to be unique and have a voice in that world. So I don't know if I want to go. I mean, it's a beautiful world, but I don't know if I would want to go there. And the second story is, it's this world. It's the world that we live in. It's just a world where magic is possible, but I kind of believe that for this world as well. So it's not as though it's where I would go, is where I'm trying to be.
Yeah.
I want to be in this world, but able to be myself and able to have an effect on the world where it feels impossible being one of 8 billion.
Yeah. Oliver, as I mentioned, man, being a filmmaker myself, being an artist, I love having my platform where I'm able to pay it forward, right, to other artists out there listening in. When it comes to our art, it can tend to be very close to us as the artist, right? And it's almost like children that we create and we give birth to and put out in the world. Now, because of how close we are to it, there can be a vulnerability that accompanies that sharing process. So, Oliver, I want to offer some assistance for new writers out there listening in, but how do you, and especially because with this book, I Dream, as you've mentioned, man, listen, this was years in the work, right? I mean, you tried it in so many different ways and didn't necessarily get your final product until just quite recently. But how do you handle the vulnerability that comes with sharing your work with the world?
Honestly, I think it's more than a desire. It's almost a need, if that makes sense. I want to read and collect knowledge, and then as I do that, something's born inside, as you said, almost like a child, that there's a desire, a story. And I don't write it yet. I let it grow. I keep reading, I keep studying, until it forms itself. And that's the thing. When the book writes itself, the characters write themselves, and then you just kind of get to know them. And it's their story, and you tell it as best as you can. And the characters will let you know what comes next, what's supposed to come next, if the book is ready to be written, if you're still formulating it. And then if you're not ready to write it, don't write it. Just go back to reading, go back to studying, go back to growing yourself. Because all this is just growing yourself. It's all internal. Reading and writing is almost like it's the same thing. It's growing as a person.
Yeah.
And so you keep studying until the book forms itself, and it'll tell you when it's ready to write, and you write it. And if it gets hard to write, it's because you're not there yet, and so you go back and you keep studying it. And as it finishes, the vulnerability is just something that you don't think about till it's too late. Honestly, this book, I Dream, it's got a lot in it. I mean, it's very personal to write, so there's a lot of me in it that I didn't necessarily want to be in it, but that was the book. So it's oversharing a little bit, and I'm guilty of that. But the only way to get the book to be as true as you want it to be, as passionate as you want it to be, you have to overshare. You put things, you write as best as you can, and that's straight from the heart.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a little too much. If it is, you wait a couple of years before you publish it. That way, people know the old you, not the current you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's very vulnerable, especially when you read afterwards. You're like, I cannot believe I wrote that. I put that so much into it. But the characters demand it, though. You have to write them. It's like you're just observing, and so it's a process that doesn't have a beginning or end. It's the entire process of just life as a person, as growing as an individual. Writing is just a step in that path, and a book is a good way to know where you were when you wrote it.
Right. Oliver, a great segue that you've established, because you're talking about, the book just naturally developing, the characters developing themselves and really kind of writing their own story. Well, my follow-up to that is, can you describe a time where your story or even your characters took on a life of their own, surprising even you as the writer?
From the beginning, honestly, because I've been writing the story so long that they've grown so much. When I started writing it, I had a full idea of where the story was going to go, kind of what it was going to be about. But then the characters go and do something different because they've created a life on their own in a way. So they feel sometimes differently than I originally wanted them to feel, but it's more honest. It's more who they are. So especially the character of the bastard, he goes his own way more often than I cared to write. But his character developed much more hard-headed, much more focused than the others, so much so that he kind of wrote his own book. So that whole third of the book is kind of it's weird. But yeah, they often go on their own way.
Oliver, this book is fantastic. As I mentioned before, this is something that we all need to just get lost in and just, travel along the hills and valleys of the journey that you've established. Well, we know about this book. We know about your background. Well, I'm focusing now on the future. Oliver, please tell me what's next for you, man. Is there another book on the horizon?
There is. I'm writing an interesting book. It's different than what I've written before. It's called Book 4, and it's a very long story, but a very personal story about a man who has always lived. He joined a brotherhood, a very ancient brotherhood, that focused on studying the truth, the subtext of the world, and they've been around for 5,000 years or so, and they studied this, and he was a member, and he was there when it ended, and he's trying to write down his thoughts and how he feels about his life and his journey, and he tries and fails 4 times to write it. And the book that I'm writing is the 4th attempt to write down his journey. And it's very interesting. It's different than anything I've ever written before, but it's a very personal book like the others, and it's a journey in of itself to write. So it's taking its time, and I'm not sure when it'll be done. Honestly, I have no idea of that, but that is what I'm working on now.
There you have it. Well, listen, people, I promise you, even though we don't have a date in the future, you're going to want to check back in frequently. Pick that book up the moment it becomes available. Mm-hmm. But in the interim, I Dream offers more than enough to keep you occupied in the interim, right? This book is magnificent. I'm going to say it again, not because I have to, just to reinstate it, okay? Because I know there's some of you out there that are dreaming, okay? And not in a good way, meaning you're asleep. You haven't quite gotten the message yet. So I'm going to say it for you again, just to reiterate it. We're here on the line with Oliver Tyson. We finished discussing his magnificent book, I Dream, available for purchase through Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. Head on over there today, pick up your copies, and just travel along this journey. Get lost in it. Take it for the entertainment that it is, but also while you're at it, read between the lines. Utilize the stories found in this book and the underlying messages of perseverance to seep into your life and help you get past some of your tough moments. I'm telling you, this book has a lot to offer people, not just entertainment. Head on over there today. Get lost in it. You can thank me later. Oliver, this has been a true pleasure, man, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.